The contract was worth $1,200,000,000. 47 pages. 6 lawyers. 3 months of negotiation. And not one person in that room, not the attorneys, not the CFO, not the CEO himself, caught the error buried on page 31. But she did. She caught it from across the hallway. Through a glass wall. While emptying a trash can. Her name was Nadine Carter. She was 58 years old. She wore a gray uniform with a small laminated badge that said Housekeeping, Level 3. She had worked in that building for 11 years. She had mopped those floors, cleaned those windows, and been looked through like she was part of the furniture. But Nadine Carter had also spent 14 years as a forensic accountant before the world decided she was disposable. And what she saw on page 31 of that contract. It was going to cost Hartwell Industries everything. The question was, would anyone listen to the janitor? The Hartwell Industries building sat at the corner of 5th and Madison like a man who knew he was being watched. 42 floors of glass and steel. A lobby that cost more to design than most people earned in a lifetime. Security desks staffed by men in suits who had been trained to smile at certain people and look past others. Nadine Carter was always in the second category. Every morning at 5:47 a.m., she badged in through the service entrance on the east side of the building. The door made a sound like a held breath releasing, a soft mechanical exhale, and she would step into the corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and the faint ghost of last night's catered dinner. She liked this hour. Before the building woke up, it belonged to people like her. The cleaners. The security overnight crew. The young woman who restocked the coffee station on every floor and who always, without fail, left a cup on the windowsill near the supply closet on the 31st floor, black 2 sugars, where she knew Nadine would find it. "Morning, Miss Nadine," the young woman would call softly, already moving to the next floor. "Morning, baby," Nadine would answer. Every day. Same words. Like a prayer. She had learned, over 11 years, to find the small dignities in a job that offered very few large ones. She did not complain. She did not explain herself to anyone. She moved through the building with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood that she was invisible and had decided, deliberately, carefully, to use that invisibility like a tool. What no one in that building knew, what Nadine had told exactly one person, the overnight security guard named Marcus who sometimes brought her jerk chicken from his wife's container on slow Tuesdays, was that she had a master's degree in financial forensics from Howard University. She had worked for 15 years at a mid-size audit firm in Baltimore. Good work. Careful work. The kind of work that made sure numbers told the truth. Then the firm was acquired. Then the restructuring. Then the quiet, bloodless process by which a 45-year-old black woman becomes a liability on a spreadsheet and a line item in a severance package. She had tried to go back. Send applications. Rewrote her resume. Sat in interviews where she could see in the interviewer's eyes the exact moment they did the math on her age and her face and decided the answer was no. Eventually she stopped sending applications. And eventually she started cleaning. Not because she had given up. But because she had 3 grandchildren, a mortgage she had co-signed for her daughter, and a very practical understanding of what the world owed her versus what it was actually going to give. She cleaned. And she watched. It was a Tuesday in October when the Hartwell Meridian merger first became visible to Nadine, not from a news alert or a company memo, but because the 31st floor suddenly smelled like fear. She knew that smell. She had worked in finance long enough to know what a high-stakes negotiation looked like from the outside, the takeout containers stacking up, the lawyers who stopped looking at the cleaning staff entirely because they were so deep in their own panic, the white boards covered in numbers that people tried to hide by turning them to the wall before she entered. She did not read those white boards. She had rules. But sometimes the numbers just presented themselves. Like the afternoon she was replacing the bin liner in the conference room adjacent to the executive boardroom, the one with the glass wall and the thin acoustic panels that did not, in fact, block sound as well as the architects had promised. She heard, Meridian's legal team signed off this morning. We're looking at a final review Friday. This deal closes, we're looking at $1.2 billion in consolidated revenue by Q3. She worked quietly. She did not look up. Then she heard the voice she had come to recognize over 11 years as belonging to the man who had never once looked at her directly, Richard Hartwell III CO, whose name was on the building. Simmons. His voice carried the specific weight of a man who has never been told no by anyone he considered worth talking to. Walk me through the compound interest schedule on the deferred payment clause. Page 31. Pause. Then a younger voice, nervous, performing confidence. Yes, sir. So the deferred tranche is structured over 48 months at a rate of 4.75%, compounded quarterly, which puts your total obligation at approximately. Nadine's hands stopped moving. She stared at the bin liner in her hands. She did the math. Automatically. Involuntarily. The way a musician who's been away from the stage for years still hears the wrong note in an elevator. The number Simmons was about to say was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Catastrophically wrong. She finished replacing the liner. She wiped the rim of the bin. She pushed her cart out of the conference room and into the hallway, and she stood there for a moment in the fluorescent quiet. 48 months. 4.75%. Compounded quarterly. The correct obligation on a deferred payment structure of that size, with those terms, was not what Simmons had said. It was $47 million higher. She had done the calculation 3 times in her head by the time she reached the supply closet. She did it a 4th time to be sure. The formula was not complicated, it was textbook compound interest, the kind of thing she had calculated so many times in her career that it lived in her hands, not just her head. The error was not a typo. It was a modeling error. Someone had entered the compounding frequency incorrectly in whatever spreadsheet generated the schedule. Quarterly compounding on that principle, at that rate, over that period, did not produce the number in the contract. She knew because she had seen contracts like this destroyed in arbitration by exactly this kind of error. She stood in the supply closet and asked herself the only honest question available. What do you do with this? She thought about the 11 years. The service entrance. The laminated badge. The coffee cup left on the windowsill. Marcus and his wife's jerk chicken. She thought about Richard Hartwell III, who had worked in this building for the same 11 years she had and had never, not once, used her name. She pulled out the small notepad she kept in her apron pocket for inventory notes. She wrote the correct calculation. All 4 steps. Clean. Annotated. Cross-referenced against the clause terms as she had heard them. Then she put it in her pocket and went back to work. She had not decided yet what she was going to do. But she had decided she was going to be ready. The next morning, Nadine arrived at 5:47 as always. Marcus was at the security desk, logging out of his overnight shift. "You look like you're thinking about something expensive," he said. "How do I get a document to Richard Hartwell?" Marcus blinked. "Which Richard Hartwell?" "The one whose name is on the building." He looked at her for a long moment. "You want me to walk you through security theater, or you want me to tell you the truth?" "Truth." His EA is a woman named Patricia Osei. She comes in at 7:30, gets a green tea from the lobby cart, and spends the first 20 minutes alone at her desk before he arrives. She's the only person who can put something on his desk that he'll actually read. Nadine nodded. "What's she like?" "Fair," Marcus said. "Which is more than I can say for most people in this building." Patricia Osei was indeed fair. She was also, Nadine discovered when she approached the 39th floor at 7:34 a.m. with her cart and her note, someone who had been watching Nadine for years with quiet respect. The particular respect that one professional woman who has been underestimated will often carry for another. "Miss Carter," she said, and Nadine was briefly stopped by the use of her name. Patricia Osei knew her name. "Is everything all right?" "I need to give you something," Nadine said. She placed the folded notepad page on Patricia's desk. "It concerns the Meridian contract. Page 31. The compound interest calculation in the deferred payment schedule is incorrect. I've written out the correct formula and the correct figure." Patricia looked at the paper. Then up at Nadine. Then back at the paper. "How do you?" 14 years in financial forensics, Nadine said. "Howard University, Masters in Accounting. I heard the clause terms through the conference room wall yesterday afternoon. I did the calculation. The error is $47 million. Patricia was very still. "The contract closes Friday," Nadine said. "I thought someone should know." She took her cart and went back to work. What Nadine did not expect, what she had deliberately not allowed herself to expect, because expectation is expensive when you live the life she lived, was that anything would happen at all. She assumed the note would be reviewed, quietly corrected by someone with the right credentials and the right job title, and that would be the end of it. The building would continue. The merger would close. Richard Hartwell III would never know the correction had come from the woman with the bin liner. That was fine. That was enough. That was not what happened. Thursday morning. 2 days before closing. Nadine was on the 28th floor restocking bathroom supplies when Patricia Osei appeared at the door. "Mr. Hartwell would like to see you." Nadine looked at her cart. Then at Patricia. "I'm in the middle of my rounds." "I know. He asked me to tell you it's important." And, Patricia paused, choosing something. "He said please." The executive floor looked different when you arrived as a guest rather than invisible staff. The same carpet. The same light. But people looked at her differently, the kind of looking that happens when someone is in an unexpected place and the observers haven't yet decided what to do with that information. Patricia led her to the corner office. Through the glass, Nadine could see 3 men. Richard Hartwell, a younger man she recognized as Simmons, and a third man in a charcoal suit she did not recognize. Patricia knocked once and opened the door. "Nadine Carter," she announced. Richard Hartwell stood. He was taller than she had registered in 11 years of peripheral observation. He extended his hand and she shook it and watched him process in real time the disconnect between what he thought he knew about who she was and what was currently happening. "Mrs. Carter, please sit down." She sat. The man in the charcoal suit leaned forward. "I'm David Chen, General Counsel. Patricia shared your note with us yesterday evening. We had our external audit team verify your calculation last night." He paused. "You were correct. The modeling error in the payment schedule would have generated a $47.3 million shortfall at the end of the deferred period." Silence. "If this contract had closed Friday," Chin continued, "and Meridian's team discovered the error in arbitration, which they would have, eventually, the liability exposure for Hartwell Industries would have been substantial. Potentially the entire deal." Nadine said nothing. She had known this. She had known it standing in the supply closet. Simmons, the younger man, had not moved. His face was the color of old paper. Richard Hartwell was looking at her with an expression she could not immediately categorize. It was not the particular non-expression of a man looking through a janitor. It was something more complicated. Something that looked, if she had to name it, like a man doing the accounting on 11 years of assumptions and finding the numbers very unflattering. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "how long have you worked in this building?" 11 years. A long pause. "And before this?" 14 years in financial forensics. Audit and contract review primarily. I left the industry in 2009. "Why?" It was a direct question. She gave it a direct answer. "My firm was acquired. I was restructured out. I applied to 17 positions over the following 2 years. I was not hired. I needed to support my family, so I took work that was available. That work was this." The room was very quiet. "You've been cleaning this building," Hartwell said slowly, "for 11 years? And you have a master's degree in financial forensics?" "Yes." He looked at the table. Then at his hands. Then at her. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Carter." "You owe me 11 years, she said. Her voice was not angry. It was simply precise. "But I'll take the apology." What Nadine Carter did not do. She did not cry. She did not tremble. She did not perform gratitude for a room full of men who were only now bothering to see her. What she did do. She asked for a copy of the corrected contract clause to review before it was resubmitted. Force of habit. David Chin slid it across the table without hesitation. She read page 31 in 40 seconds. Confirmed the correction. Initialed the margin, a small automatic gesture from 14 years of contract review, and slid it back. Chin looked at the initials. Something shifted in his expression. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "would you be open to a conversation about a consulting arrangement? Contract review specifically. We have 3 other major agreements in our pipeline this quarter." "I charge $340 an hour," Nadine said. "That was my rate in 2009. I assume it's adjusted for inflation." Pause. Then Chin almost smiled. "That's reasonable. I also want to finish my shift today," she said. "I have a second-floor bathroom that needs restocking and I told Marcus I'd cover the lobby cart for 15 minutes while the girl takes her break." She stood. "You can have Patricia send the paperwork to my home address. She has it on file." She picked up her cart from where Patricia had left it by the door. She rode the elevator back down to the 28th floor. She finished her rounds. She restocked the bathroom. She covered the lobby cart. She left a coffee cup on the windowsill of the supply closet for nobody, because the young woman who always left one for her was off that day. She left it anyway. Small dignities. 3 weeks after the contract closed, correctly with a $47.3 million adjustment that Meridian's team acknowledged with minimal drama, Richard Hartwell sent a letter to Nadine Carter's home address. Not an email. A letter. Written by hand on Hartwell Industries stationery. She read it at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning with coffee. It said, "Mrs. Carter, I have worked in that building for 14 years. I have passed you in the hallway, I suspect, hundreds of times. I cannot recall a single one of those moments clearly, which tells me everything I need to know about the quality of my attention. The error you caught would have cost this company considerably more than money. I am aware that no professional arrangement corrects what 11 years of invisibility costs a person, and I am not naive enough to think it does. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. I'm sorry it took this long. R. Hartwell. Nadine read it twice. She folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where she kept the things that mattered. Then she opened her laptop, the same one she had used to send 143 job applications over 2 years without a single offer, and she opened a new document. Nadine Carter, CFA, MS Financial Forensics Consulting Practice, Contract Review and Audit. She had 3 clients already. The 4th called the following Monday. She was not starting over. She was starting from where she had always been, which was further ahead than anyone had bothered to look. And here is the thing nobody in that boardroom talked about afterward. The $47 million error had been in the contract for 6 weeks. It had passed through the hands of 3 law firms, 2 accounting teams, and 1 very expensive external auditor. It took 11 seconds for Nadine Carter to hear it and know. Not because she was exceptional, though she was, but because she had spent 14 years training her mind to catch exactly this kind of thing, and no amount of a gray uniform and a laminated badge can take 14 years of expertise out of a person. You cannot restructure what someone knows. You cannot badge in restrictions on a mind that has already done the work. The world had spent 11 years looking through Nadine Carter. She had spent 11 years looking back. And she was patient that if Nadine's story moved you, share it with someone who's been told they're not enough. And before you go, tell us in the comments, have you ever been overlooked for something you knew you were more than qualified for? We read every single one. Subscribe for new stories every week. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Friday.